Our next speaker is Steve Nelle. Steve is a retired Natural Resources Conservation Service wildlife biologist. He retired back in 2011 after 35 years with the NRCS. He's been doing private consultations since then. Short of a helicopter pilot, Steve's probably ridden in more helicopters than all of us put together. He's flown over 3 million acres. And if you think about the size of a county, Taylor County, where I worked 14 years and first worked with Steve, was a 500,000 acre county. So that's over 6 of those counties flying deer surveys, counting deer, quail, coyotes, and taking beautiful photographs all the time of the deer, especially the bucks. My mentor, co-worker for about 8 years together before he retired. And he is a man of much talent, not only as a wildlife biologist and a range specialist, a plant identification person extraordinaire, riparian plant knowledge. And back, he told me it was a little bit hard to spread the word on butterflies and pollinators as a rough, tough wildlife biologist, but he was an expert on that too. So he's even got talent as a writer. He's got a book coming up, and he's going to tell you more about that at the end of his presentation. So Steve, come forth. Welcome. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Ricky. Ricky and I go back a long way. I could really tell you a lot of stories about Ricky, but I won't do it. So if we could switch over to the PowerPoint, we can get started. But let me say, you can actually see a lot of plants from the helicopter too. I'll be flying along with the pilot, and I'll say, oh, look at that big blue stem. Look at that Indian grass. There's Shoei Minodora. There's Orange Xmania. So I've educated my pilots about plants, and it's a good way to view the land. So I'm thankful, grateful to be here, part of your meeting. Thank you for the invitation. I always appreciate speaking with people who share a love of conservation and stewardship, native plants. So we're going to talk about a subject that's near and dear to me and to you, land stewardship, and to propose that it might be more than what you think. I'm going to begin by stating a couple of obvious things just by way of reminder and reiteration. And the first, Barney very eloquently described already why Texas is such a botanically and ecologically unique, beautiful place, whether it be the grasslands or the savannas or the shrublands or the woodlands or the forests, the wetlands, the riparian areas. You and I both already know that Texas is a wonderful place that needs committed people trying to take care of it. So that you already know. I don't have to convince you of that. Secondly, though, it's important that you and I remember that Texas is a private land state. Most of Texas is under the control of people like this. 95% privately owned. I'm glad it is. Most of Texas is still under agricultural production. These are the kind of guys that I've worked a lot with, but we have a new type of landowner that we're seeing more and more and more of in every part of Texas. The smaller landowner, the newer landowner. They're not trying to make a living from the land. They have other reasons for owning land. And so you and I have to be able to work with both kinds of people. If we're going to promote plant conservation, we have to work with private landowners of all types. It's easy and fun to work with people like this. Whoa, this thing is very sensitive. It's easy and fun to work with people like this, and we enjoy it. It's more of a challenge. Wow. Okay, it's more of a challenge to work with guys like this. But we have to work with all kinds, right? And it's important that you and I remember that really, wow, this thing is just really, is there any way to reduce the sensitivity of this thing? It's like you just breathe on it and it. But so we are in the people business. You may say, well, no, I'm in the plant business or I'm in a conservation business. But we do that only by working with and through people. So let's always keep that in mind, that we are in the people business. And so I'm going to talk to you about my 2 cents worth of what land stewardship is, but begin with what is it not? What land stewardship is not. And if you do a word search on Google on land stewardship, you get all kinds of hits, land stewardship projects. Wow, this thing's really going wild. Programs, all kinds of land stewardship initiatives, all kinds of land stewardship and conservation awards. Organizations, which many of you are members of, that promote stewardship as part of their function and mission, including your own fine organization. But we need to remember that land stewardship is not a project, it's not a program, it's not about giving or receiving of awards, it's not even about participation in conservation organizations, because land stewardship is essentially about the relationship of a person with a piece of land. That's what stewardship is all about. There's some other misconceptions that some people would say, well, stewardship means doing brush control or doing rotational grazing or prescribed burning or replanting with native plants. But we need to consider really that stewardship, land stewardship, is not just a list of practices. It's not a cookbook. It's not a recipe of things you do. Land stewardship is not just a suite of activities which a person might do, for example, to qualify for wildlife tax valuation. These things all may be done good, they may be done poorly, they may have a positive effect, they may have a negative effect. Those things are not synonymous with stewardship, because again, land stewardship is about the connection between a person and a piece of land. Have you ever thought that a person could have a relationship with land? We have relationships with other people, with our families. We even have relationships with animals, with our pets and with livestock. But the land steward has a relationship with a piece of land, and more about that later. We all tend to compartmentalize and over-specialize. Some people would say, well, I'm a plant person, I'm a bird person, I'm a water person, I'm a soil person, and that's all good. We all have our areas of interest, but we need to take a step back, use a wide-angle lens, and try to, for you and I both, to try to step back and see the big picture of the land, the soil, the water, the plants, the animals, all of the intricate interrelationships between and among these, remembering always that people are part of the land. People are part of the stewardship equation. People are part of the ecology of the land. We can never forget that. And so I hope you could agree with this basic statement that land stewardship must be and is. It's the very backbone for sustaining and caring for the natural resources and the natural values of Texas. It's the backbone, it's the cornerstone, it's the foundation. Without this stewardship ethic, which I'll define later, we won't get anywhere in taking care of Texas. And it can look like a guy in a cowboy hat, or it can look like this, or it can look 100 other ways. It turns out that the concept of land stewardship is not a new concept. If we go way back in time and study history, there's Mr. Plato, And in 400 BC, he was an astute observer, and he described what he saw on the island of Greece. And he wrote about that in some detail. He said, in the primitive state of the country, the mountains and hills were covered with soil, and there was an abundance of timber. The plains were full of rich earth, bearing an abundance of food for cattle. And then he went on in quite some detail about the water cycle of Greece, and he said that the land absorbed the rainfall. It stored the rainfall into the soil and into the earth, and it infiltrated, and it came out down in the hollows as springs and lots of flowing water and creeks and rivers, and very good description of the water cycle. But then he ended his description this way. He said, such was the state of the country, which was cultivated by true husbandmen who made husbandry their business, with a soil the best in the world and an abundance of water. So right here we see that Plato talked about the soil, the water, the plants, the animals, and then he used this word, and now it's not working. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, but we're going to keep trying till we get it right. The word husbandry and the word husbandmen is the exact same meaning as what we now call stewardship. And so Plato understood the importance of people caring for and loving the land. So what is land stewardship? I'm going to propose a definition in a moment, but these are the kinds of people whom taught me what stewardship is. These are some of the people I've worked with over the last 48 years, these and many others. This is just sort of representative sample of sort of my mentors. And as I watched them, and as I worked with them, and as I listened to them, I gained some understanding of what stewardship is at the practical level of the rancher. But I would never have been able to put that into words until I began to study and read the works of Aldo Leopold, and especially his most classic work, A Sand County Almanac, which is required reading for everybody in this room. And if you haven't read it in the last 5 years, read it again. You'll gain new insights from it every time you read it. And so I want to share with you just a couple of short excerpts that highlight Leopold's perception of stewardship. And there he is at his farm, and he said, it is inconceivable to me that an ethical relation to the land can exist without love, respect, and admiration for land, and a high regard for its value. Leopold himself was a landowner. He wasn't just talking theoretically. Oh, he went on to say that a land ethic reflects the existence of an ecological conscience. And this in turn reflects a conviction of individual responsibility for the health of the land. So that's a mouthful, but those two short excerpts describe what stewardship is. So this stewardship relation to the land can be summarized this way: that a person would have an ethical relationship to the land, that a person would literally love the land, respect the land, admire the land, have a high regard for the land, not just for what it will produce, not its monetary value, but for the land itself, and a deep appreciation, that one would have a tender conscience toward the land. Your conscience is your inner voice of right and wrong. The land steward has a tender conscience regarding the land. And finally, that person would have these convictions, these inner convictions that motivate them to take responsibility for caring for that piece of land. So stewardship is really about who you are on the inside, your values, your motivations, your attitudes toward the land. That's what characterizes land stewardship. So I want to give you my 2 cents worth about what land stewardship, a definition of land stewardship, as a deeply held inner conviction that motivates landowners to care for and sustain the land that has been entrusted to them. And why do they do it? They do it partially for their own personal benefit, and that includes financial benefit. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's good. For the benefit of future generations, always looking ahead, and for the benefits that accrue to society. And that is the primary thing that sets apart the land steward. They realize that what they do on their land benefits others. And if they do it poorly, it hurts others. And so there's a great deal of benevolence involved in genuine land stewardship. So the land steward, we could say, is a caretaker of the land. That person is one who's a conservator of the land. And when we say land, we're talking the whole enchilada, the soil, the water, the plants, the animals, all of the ecological interactions. One who practices husbandry of the land and who is devoted as a loving husband of the land, who's a custodian of the land. These are just synonyms for a land steward. Leopold said that the landscape of any farm is the owner's portrait of himself. Think about that statement. I have found it to be true. For the land steward, when you look at the land, you see the person. When you look at the person, you see the land. They are so interconnected that you almost can't tell them apart. They are grafted into each other in a way it's a little bit difficult for a non-landowner to understand and comprehend this connection, this relationship between the person and the land. There's also a very real spiritual aspect of land stewardship that many of the landowners I've worked with embrace this spiritual aspect. And here's how they would explain it. They would say, since God created everything that we call nature, including all of the ecological principles and dynamics that govern nature, and since he placed men and women in a position of responsible stewardship of creation, that provides a tremendous inner motivation to do the very best job you can of caring for what has been created. And to the extent that you don't even consider that piece of land your own, you're just a temporary tenant during your time here on earth. And so you really are working for someone else who owns the land and who calls the shots. And so whether you share that belief or not personally, never underestimate the truth of that statement for many of today's landowners. It's very real and it's very important to them. There's also some parallels between financial stewardship and land stewardship. If you were the administrator of someone's estate or their assets, your job would be first and foremost to protect the principal. But it doesn't stop there. Then you're going to use those assets, you're going to use them wisely and skillfully and carefully. You're going to use those assets to create benefit and growth. That's what financial planners do. If you were in charge of someone's assets, that's what you would do. And that's exactly what land stewards do. They are protecting the principle, which is the soil, the water, the plants, the animals, the resource base. And then they don't just put a high fence around it and call it a nature preserve. They use it. They use those assets. They manage it. They manipulate things. They grow things to create benefit and growth. Maybe financial, maybe not financial, but there's benefit and growth to stewardship. There's management. It's not hands-off preservation. It's active management. Here are some characteristics that I have observed in general amongst genuine land stewards. They are people of great knowledge. It's not just book knowledge. It's a practical working knowledge of soil, water, plants, animals. They are students of the land. They have this knowledge, and then they have concrete skills and ability to be able to manage and manipulate and orchestrate the soil and the water and the plants and the animals to achieve their objectives. They are highly committed people. For them, it's not a part-time deal. It's not a pastime. It's a full-time, deep commitment. And they have a passion for what they do. Now, they may not stand up and hoop and holler and beat their chest. They're going to tend to be a little more subdued than that. But once you get to know them, you sense how much they love the land and the passion for what they do and the enthusiasm. They are people of perseverance because they know that there's going to be setbacks when you work with the land. There's going to be drought, there's going to be wildfire, there's going to be disease, there's going to be grasshoppers, there's going to be all kinds of normal, natural, ecological setbacks, and that does not deter them. They keep going, they have to. It's that perseverance of the farmer and the rancher. Think of the guys who made it through the Dust Bowl. So they're people of perseverance. They attempt to see the big picture. It's not just about raising cows or sheep or cotton or pine trees. They try to see the whole big picture of the land, the water cycle, the whole landscape, soil health, landscape diversity. They try to keep their eye on the big picture. And they're realistic people because they do not try to force nature beyond what the natural capabilities are. They're working with the land, not trying to overrule the land. Nature calls the shots, and I think you all know that probably better than anybody. And then they're always trying to look at the long-term perspective. It's not just what you do today or tomorrow or next year. It's the next generation and the next generation after that, the long-term perspective. These are just some of the things that tend to characterize the genuine land steward. Whether he's wearing a cowboy hat or sandals and shorts, doesn't matter. It can be either way. Stewardship lands also share some general characteristics. We could say in general that lands that are operated by stewardship-minded people, they tend to be more diverse, more species of plants and animals, which y'all can appreciate. And because it's more diverse, they tend to be more stable. And if they're more diverse and stable, they're more resilient. They bounce back faster after drought, after wildfire, after some natural disturbance. They bounce back. They tend to be more in balance. We all know the concepts of what the balance of nature is, and these lands tend to be more in balance. They tend to function the way they're supposed to. The way I would say it is the way God created it to function. They tend to be more productive, and when land is more productive, it can be more profitable. That's important. And it tends to be more self-sustaining, not requiring all these continuous inputs of fertilizer and energy and labor. So those are some general characteristics of stewardship lands, but in particular, we could say that they tend to have a more healthy soil, or at least soil health is headed in the right direction. The water cycle is working the way it's supposed to be, or else it's moving in a positive trend. These lands tend to be good wildlife habitat. Good for many species, which I think y'all probably appreciate that as much as you do plants. I'm certain of it. Stewardship lands also provide the basis for productive and profitable agriculture. Most of us don't like to go very long between meals. Agriculture is pretty important to us, those who raise the things we eat. And I want it to be profitable because that's what keeps people on the land. That's what helps pay for the significant costs of owning land. So we want agriculture to be productive and profitable and sustainable. And then, of course, things that this group especially can appreciate. Stewardship lands are beautiful. And if agriculture feeds our bellies, then natural aesthetic beauty feeds our heart. And they're both equally important. We have to have both to keep us as a whole person. And then stewardship lands benefit every man, woman, and child in Texas. Need to understand where their water comes from, where their food comes from, where their carbon is stored in the soil. And so there are these benefits that happen to every person, urban, rural, and we need to do a better and better job of telling that message that every acre of well-managed private land is benefiting every citizen in the state. There's another component of stewardship that's important. You see that old man standing on the right bank of the Blanco River? Well, he's an old man. Here's what he's thinking. Will my children and my grandchildren, will they love this piece of land like I have loved it? Will they take care of this piece of land like I have tried to take care of it? That's what old landowners and land stewards think about. They're thinking about the future. So there's always this future aspect of land stewardship, always looking to the next generation, passing down those stewardship ethics to the children and the grandchildren and those who are going to have that land in the future. That little girl is one day going to own grandma's 100 acres. She's learning stewardship as a little girl. She's learning to love the land and care for the land and understand the land. Always thinking to the next generation. You've probably seen pictures like this, and the truth of that is that I don't know who said it, but those who do not understand nature are destined to deplete it. But we see it all over the places we drive around Texas. An ignorance about natural resources leads to their depletion. So that's the bad news, but the corollary is good news, is that those who understand nature best are compelled to conserve it. They're not regulated or mandated. They do it because they want to, because the better you understand something, the better you want to take care of it. That same truth is stated a little bit different way by an African ecologist who said, "We will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand. We will understand, wow. We will understand only what we are taught." So it brings to center of our attention that our job is to help people understand the land better, to be teachers of what we have learned. Always learning, always teaching. Always learning, always teaching. I want to use my friend, your president, Ricky Lennox, as an example of this. Always learning, always teaching others. Not just keeping your knowledge inside of you, but being a good steward of your knowledge and your gifts and your talents. I don't know of anyone else in Texas who has taught an appreciation of nature and native plants any better than Ricky Lennox. Teaching children, who in turn teach the children, and I know that's a part of your mission and part of what you do as an organization. So thank you, Ricky, for being a good example of that. So our job then is to become a great teacher. And this is another friend of mine who is a great teacher. And here's the definition of a great teacher by William Ward. The mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, but the great teacher inspires. And that's what we must learn to do as we convey our ideas that we have learned about the land and the plants and the soil and the whole tangle of ecology, to learn to inspire others. How many of you in this room, would you raise your hand if you have been a teacher during your previous life or still are? So it's like at least a quarter of the room. So thank you for that. Thank you for passing your passion and enthusiasm on to others. It was my high school English teacher who saw in me a desire to work in the field of conservation. And just a brief word of encouragement from her, and it sort of solidified my decision to study conservation. This is also a friend of mine, and obviously he's a rancher, he's a cowboy, but I want to make a parallel between what the cowboy does and what you and I do. How do we lead others in land stewardship? And he's practicing what is called stockmanship, which simply means skill in handling livestock. That's what that term means. And you'll notice that he is leading those cattle. He's not pushing them, he's leading them. Here is how stockmanship works. You move so that they want to move the desired direction. You make it their idea. That's really important. Not forcing, not pushing. We're not using arm twisting techniques or anything. The cowboy's motto is slow is fast and fast is slow. If you try to fast forward the learning process for cattle or for people, you're going to have a train wreck. You got to be patient. Slow is fast, fast is slow. If you move properly, they will respond properly. Does any of this sound familiar to any of you? And it's built on consistency and trust. Those cattle know him. They trust him. He knows those cattle. They have a relationship. These same elements work in working with people. And in some ways, we're not all that different than livestock. But that's how you move and work with cattle, and that's how you work with people. Those same principles work. This thing that we call land care is very complex. Don't ever let anyone tell you, well, all you have to do is this. All you have to do is this. It's extremely complex, and every acre and every ranch is different. The land steward, the landowner, here are some of the things, just a partial list of some of the things that they have to juggle and consider in managing a tract of land. Obviously, the plant cover, litter cover, I'm not going to read all of these. Plant diversity, plant succession, erosion in bare ground, the condition of the soil, the runoff, the infiltration, rainfall and drought, water quality, recharge, sustained flows. It's getting to look pretty complex. And then you have landowner objectives, the economics, the tradition and culture of owning and managing land, family issues, estate issues, And if you just keep looking at this list of things that the landowner is considering, and their mind is always churning, thinking about these things, their neighbors, regulatory issues, land fragmentation, government programs, predators, grazing management, feral pigs, brush, weeds, all these things. How can a person juggle and understand all of these facets and factors in owning a piece of land? I think it would be impossible without this, without a strong set of stewardship ethics that grounds you and helps you to try to see the big picture. I don't see how a landowner can ever manage all of those factors without a strong sense of stewardship ethics. Because that landowner, again, is a person, the land steward is a person that has this connection to the land, grafted into the land, an appreciation for the land that we perhaps can't understand unless you're a landowner, engaging their heart in loving the land, engaging their mind in understanding the science of the land, the ecological principles, engaging the hands, doing the hard work. This person is a student of the land. No matter how old they are, they realize that there's no easy answers. There's no simple solutions. Some of the people in your organization are the heroes of conservation and stewardship in Texas. You have people in your organization that are the experts in their field that share that information with others, who do all kinds of various activities and things to promote your organization, whether it be landscaping with native plants or collecting native plants or the hands-on restoration efforts. All of these things are some of the things that your organization does. And so, especially investing in the next generation, teaching young people about plants and about responsibility and taking care of things and learning to understand and love the land, teaching school children, teaching others. And so my hat's off to you as an organization. The work you do is important. Thank you for what you do. But you and I both need to be reminded of this statement right here. We all love our pretty flowers, me just as much as you. But stewardship is really a lot more than pretty flowers. It's a lot more than pollinator gardens. It's a lot more than xeriscaping the landscape at the school. Those are all important, but stewardship is a much bigger picture. And you and I both need to strive to get out of our comfort zone and try to see the big picture of the land. So I want to end here with a tribute to the land, a thing of great beauty, a thing of great value. It's worthy of our very best to take care of it. Here's for some of the things that the land produces, whether it's water or food or livelihood or wildlife or a dozen other things. And here's to the people, the men and women who are the responsible caretakers of a piece of land, the land stewards who take that responsibility seriously. And then here's to you, again, the organization, but really to each member. Thank you again for what you do, for your devotion to the natural world, for taking care of it. And all of us, including myself, need to try to see the big picture. That, yeah, native plants are important, but also seeing the big picture of the plants and the animals and all the ecological dynamics. So that's my challenge to you and to myself. And then let me just end by saying that if this discussion of stewardship is something that you would want to read more about, there's going to be a book coming out later this fall, Lessons from Leopold, where I deal in Aldo Leopold's philosophies, and I had a lot of help writing this book from up here up front, Ileana and others. And so if you're interested in perhaps, this is a crazy remote, I'm telling you what. You can actually pre-order that book here if you so desire and get a discount on it. But really, I want to go back here and just say thank you for allowing me to be a part of your meeting. And anything I can ever do to help any of you, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you, Steve.